Hey friends, and welcome back to the channel, or welcome if you are new here. I just had a strange thought and realized I don't ever really introduce myself, and I don't really know why that is. I have this weird thought that I guess you already know who I am, even though you probably don't, especially if you are new here and this is your first time seeing me. So, my name is Shelby, and I am a huge book lover. I love to read books, I love to buy books, I love to look at books. So, that is what you can expect from this channel. I also like to integrate things about myself, so you'll also see like vlogs where I have not just things about books, but my everyday life as well. So, welcome if you are new here, and I hope you'll stick around. But in this video, we are going to be talking about my monthly wrap-up. So we are going to discuss all the books that I read in the month of November, which I'm very excited. This was a very good reading month. Probably one of the better reading months that I've had this year. And definitely way better than last month. So we're gonna go ahead and hop right into talking about those books. I just had to kick my dog out of the bedroom because she came barging in and ran straight to my bathroom. She loves to go into the bathtub. That is a spoiler alert if you have been watching my channel for a little while. I did not always have a dog. I got a dog almost 2 weeks ago now, which that is going to have its own separate video that I'll be editing and uploading here soon, so stay tuned for that. But I'm very happy to have her, even though she just bursted through my room. Let's go ahead and start talking a little bit about the books that I read in the month of November. Actually, before we jump right in, do you guys like my little sweater? I actually don't know what you call this. I don't know if it's actually called a sweater, but Libby bought this for me. It was a surprise. She found it at Marshall's, and it's kind of like a big blanket, but it's got like a hood and a little pocket area and stuff, and it's got little gingerbread cookies and like sugar cookies and things like that on there. I think it's so cute and perfect for this time of year, and it is so warm. I've actually been wearing this quite a lot to go take the dog for a walk, and it's kept me very, very warm. Anyways, let's get into talking about all the books that I read this past month. So like I said, I had a very, very good reading month this past month, and I'm quite surprised at myself because I had a goal at the beginning of the year where I said I was going to read 5 nonfiction books in the year. Up until November, I had read 0. I hadn't read any of those or any nonfiction. So I thought, I'm definitely just not going to meet this goal. I'll be lucky even if I read 1 nonfiction this year. But to my surprise, I actually read 5 nonfictions in November. So we'll start there, and then we'll talk about the rest that I read. Pretty much all of these were either audiobooks or ebooks. I think I only have one of them that is an actual physical copy. So, anywho, the first nonfiction I actually read, and it's funny because I was watching Destiny's video and she was talking about this book, and that instantly inspired me to read this book because I was also watching the TV show that this person is from. So I was like, wow, I really should read this book. I didn't realize that that was her book. This one is called Dinner for Vampires, Life on a Cult TV Show. And that is by Bethany Joy Luntz. And she is from One Tree Hill. I used to watch that show all the time. Like, not when it was airing. I think I only saw the last season when it was airing because my stepmom would watch it all the time, and I was like, what the heck is this show? I used to think it sucked back then. Which, granted, I do think the later seasons are not the best, but I think I saw it on like Netflix or something like that, I started watching the entire series from the beginning, and I fell in love with it. So that is one of my comfort shows. I think I've talked about that previously, but I ended up reading that book. That was the first nonfiction that I read, and I absolutely enjoyed this book. This book really kind of like showcased what it's like to be in a cult, and like you not even really realizing that you're in a cult, or you like basically convincing yourself of being in a cult. Like, she was so in disbelief. Like, every time people would kind of like bring it up, she'd be like, no, you're crazy, that's not what this is, like, it's just a family, that kind of stuff. And I just thought that was really, really interesting, alongside being on such a highly popular like TV show. So I really enjoyed this book. I did give it a star rating, although I do think, like, Destiny has said this in her videos as well, like, it's kind of weird to give a star rating for someone's book about their life. Like, this is like a memoir, so it's kind of weird to kind of sit there and be like, no, this was like a 4-star or 5-star, because it's about their life. I gave this book a 5 stars. I had such a good time reading this book, and I read it in like 2 days. It was really, really enjoyable. I think that the writing was amazing. I don't know if she wrote this book herself or if she had a ghostwriter, but I listened to the audiobook and she narrated it, and I think when they narrate it, it just lands so much better. So I highly recommend reading or listening to the audiobook if you are interested in it. I've also realized, I think when it comes to nonfictions, I probably would prefer more like memoirs and like autobiographies, or biographies, more than I would like the self-help books or things like that. I think the self-helps are good in smaller quantities for me. Otherwise, it's too much information that I'm not really doing much with. But I do enjoy like the memoirs and things like that. So that leads me to my next nonfiction book, which was another memoir. And this one was, again, someone from one of my absolute favorite TV shows, The Gilmore Girls. And this was the third Gilmore Girl, a memoir by Kelly Bishop, which this one was so fun to read. I think that she's all like amazing. Like, I love Emily. Emily is probably one of my absolute favorite characters from that show. If I had to rate the Gilmore Girls, I would say it would be Lorelai, Emily, and then Rory. I don't really care for Rory very much at all, but I think that Emily is just such an amazing character, and she plays this role so well. And it really just goes on a journey of her life, just like our other nonfiction. But this one was so interesting because it really, like, I feel like I was really transported back in time, because the things that she was talking about in her life feels like something so different from what I see now. Just how she kind of talked about getting into show business. She actually started off as a dancer, which I didn't know that, which is really amazing. And just kind of hearing her journey and how she even got to the role of Gilmore Girls was so exciting to hear. And just also her take on a lot of different things. Also, like, she talks about like kids and like why she didn't have kids and things like that. And I think that was just really nice and refreshing to hear someone be like really honest and transparent about a lot of these things, and also just being really honest with themselves. So I very much enjoyed this book. She also narrated this book herself, so if you are interested in listening to the audiobook, I highly recommend it. She's just such a lovely lady. I also didn't know that Kelly wasn't her name. They explain, or she explains, like, how her name got changed in the book itself, but I didn't realize that Kelly wasn't her name. I think her real name is actually like Carol or something like that. So I don't know, it's interesting. I did end up rating the third Gilmore Girl a 5-star as well. This was a really, really good story, and I read this one in a couple of days as well. I think probably another 2 days. I can't remember off the top of my head, either 2 or 3 days, but this one was really, really good, and I enjoyed it, so I highly recommend that you check it out. Especially if you're looking into getting into nonfictions, I do recommend the memoir route. Those are always pretty entertaining, especially if it's about someone that you're really like interested to know more about. All right, so I'll go ahead and just talk about the last nonfiction memoir-ish book that I read, which was The Woman in Me by Britney Spears. This one had been on my list for quite some time, honestly, since it came out, and since all of like the controversy that was going down with her conservatorship and things like that. So I'd wanted to read this book for a while, but I kept kind of putting it off, and I don't really know why. I have a couple of things that I do want to say about this book, and I'm going to just be as honest as I possibly can. And this is, let me mute this. And this is like not to be negative or to be mean or harsh or anything like that towards Brittany, because I 100% believe the things that she says. I 100% know that if I was going through that, I would be in a dark place. But I feel like she didn't write this book. I don't know that for sure, but I feel like there was a ghostwriter for this book. And if there was, I don't know. This book just didn't land very well for me. I thought the overall story and just kind of hearing about her life was really amazing. There was a lot of things that were put into perspective for me. She talks about like some key moments in her life that were very much documented throughout media, that I remember like growing up, like seeing them on like magazine covers and things like that. And she kind of explains those, and it was so great to hear her side of things and her perspective on like where she was at and why she was doing these things. But the writing just kind of felt like it was a child writing the book. Like, I don't know how else to describe it. It just, I don't know. It just didn't, the writing didn't sell it very well to me. Yeah, I don't know. It was weird. The structuring of it as well was also quite weird. I felt like it was broken up into many different chapters, which it didn't really need to be broken up that way. But either way, I still gave this a 5-star because this is her life and the things that she's been through, and the story that they were trying to tell. I felt, like I felt for her. It was really hard to get past the writing. Also, she did not narrate the book. I listened to this as an audio as well. And I don't know. For me personally, I think it goes a lot better if they are the ones to narrate their own book. I think it lands better. You feel what they're feeling a lot more, because it's almost like they're able to kind of not act it out, but really showcase the emotion and things that they were feeling during this time, because they're kind of going back to that moment. However, in the beginning of the book, she does speak a little bit, and she explains why she is not reading the book, because she did not think it was the best thing for her and her mental health to revisit that. So I do not blame her for not reading the book at all. I think that was a very smart decision if she knew it wasn't good for her. But I think it would have probably landed a little bit better if it was her reading the book. So I don't know if this one reads better if you read the physical book versus listening to the audio, but I just didn't enjoy the audio as much as I would have hoped I would have. But yeah, overall, I did enjoy the story of her life, which is really sad and honestly really heartbreaking that her own family turned their backs on her the way that they did, which is messed up. And she funded their whole life, which is really crazy. She does talk a little bit about like when they started like taking over like her money and all this other stuff, how like she got an allowance. And I was like, how do you get an allowance for your own money? That's actually crazy. But yeah, she really goes in depth about like just some of the more hard things with the conservatorship, and it really explained a lot as to her behavior and things like that. So all right, so I have 2 more nonfictions that I'm gonna talk about. The next nonfiction I want to talk about, first off, the last 2 are not memoirs. They're just like self-help books. This first one, I'm going to read it off because it is really, really long. I found this one on Everand, which is another like audiobook, ebook subscription that I use. And this one was called Law of Attraction Beginner's Guide, Proven Principles and Techniques to Make the Law of Attraction Work for Relationships, Money, Weight Loss, Love, and Business so you can live your dream life. First off, not a big fan of titles that are really long like that. I feel like that's just really unnecessary. You could have just said Law of Attraction Beginner's Guide and left it there. But that's just a little pet peeve of mine. It's not a big deal. But this was by Olivia Clifford, and this one was really good. It's a short book, I think. It's very, very short. And I read this basically in one sitting, which maybe is not the best thing to do when it's like a self-help book, but I was enjoying hearing what had to be said. So I got a little bit from this where you kind of like have to change your mindset about how you look at things. The law of attraction is really just that. Like, whatever you put out there is what you're going to attract. And she had a moment in that book where she was kind of talking about like your life and where you're at right now. And this part really stuck with me, where she was basically saying how even without you realizing it, you are living your dream life right now. And what she, I think, means by that is where you're at in your life right now, you somehow attracted those things into your life. Whether it's good or negative, whatever it may be, you kind of put those things out into the universe, and that's what the universe gave back. And I do believe in that very much, because if you're sitting there and you're constantly negative and negative and negative, like, obviously it's just going to be more negative things coming back to you, because that's what the universe is hearing, and that's what the universe thinks that you want. So that's what it's going to give you. And it doesn't mean that you're going to be happy and positive all the time, but it's just really about changing your mindset on how you look at things and being grateful for the things that you do have. But I thought that this book was really good, and I don't remember what I rated this actually. I gave this one a 3 stars. I think I ended up giving this one just a 3 stars because it did become a little bit repetitive towards the end. Like, it was a very short book, but it felt like we weren't really gaining anything that wasn't already said. It just kind of was being said in multiple different ways, but the same thing was being said over and over again. So I ended up giving that one a 3 stars, but I learned some things from that book, so I still thought it was worth the read. And then the last nonfiction that I read, this one has been on my radar for a very long time, so I'm glad that I finally read it. Although I'm going to be completely honest, I don't remember a whole lot from this book. I wish I would have written things down as I was reading it, because then it would have stuck in my mind a lot better. So I can always go back to it, I know that. But this is The Mountain Is You, Transforming Self-Sabotage into Self-Mastery. And I did end up giving this book a 4 stars. I did enjoy this one a lot more than the Law of Attraction book. But like I said, I don't remember that much from this book now, which is crazy. Like, I'm sitting here trying to think of like specific things, and I don't remember that much, which is crazy. But I think this one also really just kind of focuses on like your behaviors and how you can self-sabotage yourself, and learning how those, like, basically learning how to have a better response to things and better behaviors towards like different conflicts and things that come up in your life. So basically another kind of form of law of attraction. But I thought this book was good and worth the read. Wish I could say more, but I don't remember. Okay, now let's get into the rest of the books that I read. The rest were all fictions. So, starting off, the very first book I read this month was my buddy read with Jessica, and she ended up picking Legends and Lattes, the first book. I have not read this book until then, but it had been on my radar for quite some time, and I'd had it saved for quite some time, but just hadn't picked it up yet. So I was really happy that she ended up picking this, because that meant I could get something that was on my TBR off the list. But I was actually really disappointed in this book. I ended up giving this book a 2-star rating, which is really sad. I was really looking forward to it because I know that a lot of people enjoyed it, but I just feel like most books that I hear on Book Talk just aren't really books for me. That's what I'm slowly starting to figure out. But it was I guess, presented as like a cozy read, and it's very like fantasy-esque. Got our main character, and essentially she goes and she, I think, just decides she's kind of over the life that she lives and doing the same thing over and over again, and she decides she's not going to do it anymore, and she's going to go off and open up her own coffee shop, which was interesting because nobody knew what coffee was. So it kind of just talks about that and like her building the menu and getting like the shop ready to open, and it's also kind of like a little love story as well. I just didn't really enjoy this book. Yeah, I read it just to say that I read it because it was our buddy pick, and I've already once put down a book that she picked, and I didn't want to do that again. And I was also really interested to see more about this book, but it just didn't really get any better. I didn't enjoy the writing. It felt very flat. Like, it didn't feel like it had any dimension. Didn't feel like it was, like, I just felt like I couldn't connect. I couldn't connect to the characters. I didn't care about the story. I don't know. I guess I was hoping for more, and I didn't really get that. So I ended up giving that one, like I said, a 2-star. The next book I read, I was very, very excited to finally get my hands on this. This is a sequel to one of my favorite books, which is Nothing Like the Movies, which is the second book, or the sequel to Better Than the Movies, by Lynn Painter. And I loved Better Than the Movies so much, so I was so excited to see our main characters come back in another book. And this one I ended up giving a 3 stars. It was an okay book. I didn't have too high of, and like, I didn't have high expectation because I wasn't really sure what the plot was going to be about. I didn't read anything on the book. I just knew once I heard it was announced that I was going to read it, and I wanted to go into it blindly. But we basically see our main characters, Wes and Liz. We basically catch up with Wes and Liz and their journey of like college life, and kind of see where they're at now, and they're not in the best place. And it's kind of just following along that journey and kind of going back in time to see what happened and what caused them to separate. And I just thought that this book was cute, but it wasn't Better Than the Movies. It was definitely just a cute little continuation to kind of wrap up the story of them. And yeah, that was it. It was nice to go back and revisit them, but definitely was not my favorite. I will continue to read Better Than the Movies, but I don't know if I'll necessarily read this one again. It did feel like this book did feel like it wasn't necessary, but I'm happy that it exists. Alright, so then the next 2 that I read was the beginning of the Thorn of Glass series. So I've done a whole reading vlog on this, and I'm going to continue to do some vlogs on this, so stay tuned for that. I have not read the Thorn of Glass series in its entirety. So I had started this a long time ago after I read ACOTAR, because I read ACOTAR first, and everybody... I had read ACOTAR first, and then essentially I kept wanting to go back into the world of Sarah J. Maas, so I heard about Thorn of Glass, and I wanted to pick that series up. I picked it up. I think I read like the first 2 books, and then I just put it down. I didn't pick it back up again. I felt like it was hard for me to get into that when I was so wrapped up in the world of ACOTAR, and I think I honestly just wanted to stay there. But I have read all of her other books. I've read all the ACOTAR series, and I've read all Crescent City. And I know from reading Crescent City that the universe is starting to connect. So I really, really wanted to get into Throne of Glass because I have no idea if that is going to be important in continuing Crescent City or not. Which I'm not even sure if I really want to continue Crescent City because the last book was just not really my favorite. But either way, I decided I was going to read Throne of Glass, and so I am documenting reading Throne of Glass for the first time. Because I didn't remember a darn thing about that series. So it really does feel like I read these first two books for the first time all over again. But I read Throne of Glass, which I ended up giving a 4.75 stars. It was almost a 5 stars, but I didn't want to give it too high of a rating because I knew that there was still more to come, and that was just the beginning of the story. But I thought that it was really interesting. I loved our main character, Celaena Sardothien, and just like the idea of her being a 16-year-old assassin and being like the best assassin known to man. And she definitely is much more than meets the eye, and I'm starting to learn that because after finishing this book, I picked up Crown of Midnight. And this book, I ended up giving another I think it was a 4.8, something like that. Basically close to another 5 star. And I very much enjoyed this book as well. It was fun to see her more so in the element of an assassin, because the first book we don't really get to see a whole lot of what she is capable of. We hear a lot about like stories from her and we can see little glimpses, but she was really meant to keep it low-key in the first book. However, in this one, she is very much gone into full assassin mode because something really tragic happens and she gets very angry and is basically ready to take out everyone in her path. So yeah, I enjoyed this book as well, and I'm very eager to finish the rest of this series. I'm going to read Assassin's Blade, which I did read at the beginning of the year, but I don't remember very much of that story because I know that is like short stories. It's basically the like a prequel to Throne of Glass, where it tells of Celaena's like adventures and stories and stuff before Throne of Glass actually happens. So there's many different ways in which you can read the book, or people have many different opinions on how you can read the series, I'm sorry, but I decided to go with Throne of Glass, Crown of Midnight, and then Assassin's Blade, and then I'm going to tandem read, I think it's Emperor of Storms and Tower of Dawn, but I also know some people read Assassin's Blade first, which I think you can read it either way, honestly. I think you could probably read it either way because it's meant to be a prequel, so there's nothing wrong with you reading it first, but I know a lot of people say to read it third. I've also seen some people read it fourth, which is what I was originally going to do, but then upon doing more research, I was like, no, I'll do it third. But yeah, so that was those were the two books. And then my final book, which was my physical read, was The 7-Year Slip, which I was very excited to finally pick this book up. This was on Amazon for really, really cheap. It was like $6, and I was like, I'm just gonna snag it because I've been wanting to read this for a little while, but I thought I was just gonna read it on Kindle, but I mean, it was really cheap on Amazon, so I just took it. But this one was so cute. Now I see what all the hype is about with this book. I really, really enjoyed this. I think I'm going to need to now read this author's other books. What's her name? Ashley Poston. She writes a really beautiful story here. It follows our two main characters, which is Clementine and... what's the other guy's name? What's his name? Clementine and James Ewan. I think they refer to him as Ewan in this book. But basically our main character, Clementine, she has like an incredible relationship with her aunt, and unfortunately her aunt passes away, but her aunt has this really awesome apartment in New York City that is also magical. And her aunt gifted her that apartment. So she ends up moving in, and we end up finding out that this magical apartment is actually magical and can transport you back 7 years. And that's why it's called the 7-year slip. And then basically she ends up meeting Iwan, but this is 7 years ago. And she's actually, for her it would be present time, but for him it's 7 years ago. I don't know. It's an interesting story. But long story made short, it was very sweet, very cute. And you kind of follow along her journey of kind of like love and loss and finding yourself. And I thought that this was done really, really well. And now looking at the cover, it makes a lot more sense, because you can see this would be our main character, that would be our other main character, and then these guys, they make an appearance. I'm not going to tell you who they are, but they do make an appearance in the book quite a few times, and their names are hilarious. So yeah, this book was very good. I ended up giving this one a 4.75 as well. And yeah, those were all the books that I read this year, or not this year, all the books that I read this month. So I'm very much looking forward to what is to come in the next month. I've definitely surpassed my reading goal this year, and now I need to start thinking about what my reading goal will be for next year. Can't believe the year is already over. Anyways, that is all I have for this video, but stay tuned because there's going to be plenty more content to come. I've got some videos already planned out, and yeah, I will see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.